Holy Gods and Monsters Batman! James Gunn dropped a delicious tease for DC's upcoming slate of projects, and the future is looking gold. What new, exciting characters are about to shake up DC's entire universe? And what does it mean for DC's future? Let's discuss. Because I'm such an impatient person, this wait to hear James Gunn's DC plan was excruciating. But now, after finally hearing it, I can say that I'm very excited for the future of DC. It seems like the tease we got was a good mix of fan-favorite reimaginings, long overdue film and TV announcements, and some off-the-wall weirdness that gives DC its unique appeal. I mean, new Swamp Thing, a new Batman, new Green Lanterns, come on, that's incredible. Today I'm talking about the best characters that were announced and what DC is going to do with them. So first up, I have to talk about the one I'm just positively buzzing over. Booster Gold is getting the live-action treatment he deserves. Booster Gold is a bit of a scummy individual who travels back in time from the future to make a name for himself in a more primitive time. But even though he has some fancy futuristic upgrades and his best robot pal Skeets by his side, he still finds this whole hero thing difficult. Who knew constantly being a symbol of hope and peace and love and yada 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 took so much work? I think Booster Gold is the perfect type of character that will differentiate these new DC characters from MCU's heroes. He's a self-centered, fame-seeking glory hound, but will still ultimately do the right thing when called upon. If done right, Booster Gold has a bright future ahead. And I like how they're starting him off in an HBO show first to basically test the waters to make sure audiences embrace him. And hey, if this leads to a Blue Beetle team up down the line, I'm totally down. Plug your ears, Henry Cavill, because I'm actually not that upset anymore about the recasting of Superman. Look, I think the powers that be were in a tough spot. Yes, Henry Cavill deserved a chance to be in a non-controversial traditional Superman movie, but by doing so, it would always tie into the past, which is just a little exhausting at this point. It's clear DC needs a fresh start as much as possible, so I think it's a smart move to start fresh with Superman. So in just a few years, we'll have a new Superman movie, and hopefully this one sticks. So far, Gunn, who is writing it and could very well end up directing if he has the time, seems to understand what makes the Superman character so influential. He also seems to understand that the best way to write a Superman story is by hitting that like and subscribe button below. Wow, who knew? Seriously, you should try it too. Anyways, the inherent goodness of the character can still be interesting if done right, and Superman can go back to being the cornerstone of the DC universe. But now, here's a question for you. Trunks or no Trunks? Okay, fine. Here's a more important question for you. Are you more excited for a Superman standalone movie focused on his growth as a character, or are you more excited for Superman's interactions with other heroes? Robin is getting his shot at the big screen again. And no, it's not Bat Nipple Robin or John, go by my middle name Robin Blake. It's a straight up, no nonsense Robin adaptation. Yes, it is a little surprising that Damien Wayne is going to be brought into the DC universe given his general controversial nature, but here's why I'm really stoked for this. For one, I think having Damien be introduced as Robin will absolutely give Batman a new dynamic on screen that we've never seen in the live action films before. Having him be a father trying to train his assassin son to be a hero is a different take than what we've seen before. It will definitely stand apart from Robert Pattinson's younger Batman. And the other reason I think using Damien is an A+ idea is because it basically confirms Nightwing and Red Hood are out there somewhere, which are characters fans have been clamoring for a long time. Damien is definitely a little rough around the edges though, so it will be interesting how the DCU adapts him, and it's all about finding the right young actor to fit the part. But of course, that brings me to Batman. We are having a new Batman movie called The Brave and the Bold, and as I already mentioned, it's going to highlight Batman in a way we haven't seen tackled quite yet, and that's with his whole fatherhood angle. So here's another big question for you. If we assume that 71-year-old Michael Keaton won't be the DCU's long-term Batman with a young, newly teenaged son, that means we're getting a new Batman for the main DCU timeline, right? My question is, do you cast him as a slightly older and more more established, like a John Hamm-esque age? Or do you make him a little bit younger and experiencing fatherhood in his 30s? I only ask because Batman will hopefully interact with Superman a lot in the new DCU, and if Superman Legacy is having a younger Superman, but Batman is this middle-aged hero with a kid running around, will that affect this dynamic? That's truly keeping me up at night. I don't know who I want as the new Batman for this timeline, but I will say, I do hope Ben Affleck doesn't star, but rather gets to direct instead. He's a fantastic director who at one point wanted to make a Batman movie even though he was done with the Batman character. This way, everyone wins. Let's move over to the Green Lanterns. A Green Lantern buddy cop detective show was announced centering on Hal Jordan and John Stewart. Hey, that's great. What's that? James Gunn said it was like True Detective? Okay. Look, obviously the first True Detective season is iconic, but that's a bold swing to say your show about two intergalactic space cops with magic rings will have similar vibes to it. Anyways, I'm just happy Hal Jordan is getting his shot at redemption. Clearly, he's the most famous Green Lantern, and for a time there, it looked like Hal Jordan was going to be sidelined in whatever big Green Lantern Corps plans the DC had. It's been over 10 years since the disastrous Ryan Reynolds bomb, so it was time Hal got his second chance. He's the perfect lead for the show, and pairing his cocky attitude with Jon Stewart's more straight-laced military attitude, I think will pay out dividends. I'm a little worried that the scope of the show is too big for a TV budget, but I guess we'll see. Gunn said that this new Lantern show will play a big part in leading into the main story they plan on telling across film and TV. So it's kind of important that this show is a success, and with someone like Hal at the center, I believe it can be. Let's turn our attention to the other main Lantern. It's Jon Stewart. I would bet that a lot of fans grew to be Jon Stewart fans first by watching the animated Justice League show, and now we're getting him in live action as a main character. That's great. For a while, Jon Stewart's future was so up in the air. First, there was that whole Arrowverse thing where you could tell they couldn't truly commit to making John Diggle their version of Jon Stewart. Then, the previous big-budget Green Lantern Corps show was in development that first was announced as focusing on Alan Scott and Guy Gardner. Then it was retooled to focus on Jon Stewart by himself. Then that show was scrapped altogether with the new management. Jon Stewart's future was so up in the air, but I'm glad they settled on making the show a 1-2 punch with Stewart and Jordan. Stewart is interesting, but he's known for being the no-nonsense straight man, which on its own doesn't always yield the best stories. But pairing him directly with someone like Hal Jordan immediately makes this one of the most anticipated projects on my list. Bring on True Detective Lantern Edition. So this phase is described as gods and monsters, so let's get to some monsters. And one of the best monsters in all of DC is Swamp Thing. Now, this is a pretty big swing for DC, and I truly hope it plays out successfully. Yeah, you and I probably love Swamp Thing, and will seek out all Swamp Thing content, you know, unless it's that lackluster TV show we don't talk about anymore. But DC has the task of making Swamp Thing have mainstream appeal, which, I mean, good luck. It's described as a horror project, so I really hope DC goes deep with Swamp Thing's roots and isn't afraid to get a little weird. But I think Swamp Thing's success will rely on how successful and well received the first few projects of this phase are, and if they can secure a bankable name for the director's chair. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is a film coming soon to theaters near you, which means Supergirl will become a main force for this DCU. James Gunn mentioned that this is a Supergirl who's more hardened than her previous on-screen iterations and is much harsher than her saintly cousin Kal-El. I mean, that makes sense. It's interesting to highlight the differences between Kal and Kara given how they were raised, and will create an interesting dynamic between them. I just really like overall how this DCU phase not only creates interesting characters by themselves, but also creates scenarios where it will be fascinating to see them interact with other heroes. That's entertaining storytelling. I wonder how it will all play out. It's unclear if this new version of Supergirl will be the same one we see in The Flash's upcoming movie, but I imagine that's going to be based on fan reaction. We do know that the new big screen Supergirl is going to be heavily inspired by Tom King's comic book run from 2022, so if you're interested, pick up a comic book. One of the most surprising announcements James Gunn made was that The Authority were getting their own movie. Quick, who had The Authority on their James Gunn announcement bingo cards? Anyone? No one? Yeah, that makes sense. But really, they fall right into James Gunn's wheelhouse, so it's no wonder he's a fan. They're a more brutal superhero team compared to your traditional heroes, and think the world is broken in such a way where they need to take things into their own hands to save the day. Remember how Peacemaker would be like, peace at all costs, no matter what? Yeah, The Authority really are in that same vein, so again, not a surprise to see Gunn drawn to them. But who are these heroes? Well, there's a ton of different lineups, but a few of the original and most well-known Authority members include Midnight and Apollo, which, I mean, how funny would it be if they cast Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill here? And last but not least, we have an animated show about the Creature Commandos, which sounds like it will really lean into the monster aspect of this first phase. It's animated, which is actually great, because it allows for more out there and effects-heavy storytelling. And hey, great news for all you Weasel fans out there. If you thought Weasel was underrepresented in the Suicide Squad, that's okay, because Weasel will be back for this team. You'll also have Rick Flag Sr., Bride of Frankenstein, and Dr. Phosphorus, among others, which all sounds incredibly exciting. And James Gunn has already written episodes for this show, so it's going to be packed with his style of humor. Overall, I think it's beneficial to have one unifying voice working in the DC universe. I mean, I guess you just have to be a fan of James Gunn, because if you aren't, well, maybe this phase won't be for you, but for the rest of us, I say bring it on. James Gunn has said this isn't even the whole slate and rather just a small tease. What other big characters do you want to see announced? This is the gods and monsters phase after all, so what other gods and or monsters deserve their time to shine? Thanks for watching CBR.